All right, man, peace. So a few months ago, I did a video called Why Are Americans So Lonely? And I realize now that I really should have a video about why are people all across the westernized, mechanized world so lonely? Because it's very obvious to me that due to the deculturalization of the so-called civilized world, that many of these people are just becoming flesh and blood androids, flesh and blood robots. They're trying to dissolve and disintegrate any form of valency between men and women to the point where both parties are suffering in silence, especially the people of the quote-unquote liberal variety, meaning what? The Luciferians, the people who claim to be so empowered, so free, so enlightened, so elucidated. They're suffering in silence. Many of these people that you pass by every day are dealing with mental issues, psychological problems, quote-unquote depression. Why is that? Because people cannot relate to one another anymore. And that brings me to this segment right here. They had a female psychiatrist on the show who was going to try to explain to the best of her ability why people today are so quote-unquote lonely. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
This morning, a condition that is so common, you actually may not think of it as a mental health problem. We're talking about loneliness. Previously published research suggests there could be a link between being lonely and your overall health.
Hey, news, sir.
Of course, there's a link between being quote-unquote lonely and your overall health. Because your mind state, your mental frame is going to affect your body because they're directly correlated. That's obvious. And the mainstream liberal media is only on the cusp of starting to acknowledge and admit what the deculturalization program of the quote-unquote civilized world is doing to the average person, which is making them a fucking nut job. Excuse my language, but it is what it is. Especially so many of these so-called liberal women, these modern day feminist women. Feminism has done more to eradicate what little mental stability the woman had in the first place than anything else on the planet Earth. We see it today with the quote-unquote gender war agenda, where everybody wants to go back and forth with each other. I see it oftentimes on the internet. People try to bring that energy on my channel, and that will not be tolerated at all. There will be no gender war bullshit on my channel. And I tell brothers this all the time. You're not supposed to be going back and forth with a woman. When you go back and forth with a woman, that's like going back and forth with a child. Many times the woman will try to get you into a back and forth over nothing because she wants to see if she can get you to descend to her level of nonsense. The woman is beautiful. She's essential. When she's in her right mind, she's irreplaceable. But no, you're not supposed to be going back and forth with no damn woman. But why do they do that for? Because the modern day female has been trained to believe that every once in a while she should shake up her life. She should shake up her relationships. She should bring chaos into an environment that is placid. Why is that? Because the woman by nature is an agent of chaos. That's just what they are. But anyway, let's let them talk.
A survey released by the health services company Cigna tried to gauge the extent of loneliness in America. A little over 20,000 adults were surveyed using the UCLA Loneliness Scale, a questionnaire designed to evaluate the level of loneliness and our social isolation that someone might feel. For more, we are joined by Dr. Gail Saltz.
Now, you notice every time they have a psychiatrist on these shows, it's always a female. Why is that? Because they're trying to get people to accept and understand that the female is going to be the solver of problems, when we know that, in fact, most problems are caused by the woman and her nonsense. The woman in general has to be moderated. Look, I know a lot of people are not going to like what I'm saying. It's okay. It's okay. At the end of the day, the man's job is to provide balance to the woman, because the woman is so capricious. She's so whimsical. She's so mentally unstable by nature. And of course, we know that the woman in her essential nature is a great nurturer. She provides a great support and a stay. She's irreplaceable in the family unit. All these things are known. But at the end of the day, she still has to be moderated. But in this society, they want to create this aspect of the woman that she is an entity who can establish social mores, senses of propriety, which is not the case. The woman is not an administrator. She cannot sit down and create law codes for people to abide by. She cannot create standards of conduct. That's not in her nature. Men have to do that. But this is why they always have these female psychiatrists on these shows. And it's really to help foster the understanding of the woman that you're crazy, not because of yourself, but you're crazy because of what men are doing. So we're going to have established experts in the psychiatric field who also happen to be women that are going to assist you with the problems that you have. Please understand that the antidepressant medication field is a multi-billion-dollar industry. They don't care that you're lonely. They're just noting it because it's something to talk about. They need people to be lonely because loneliness leads to desperation. Desperation leads to drug use. Drug use leads to bad decisions. Bad decisions lead to court cases. That leads to more money, more money, more money. Once again, the medication field is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The judicial field, meaning court cases, that is a multi-billion-dollar industry as well. They're even going to tell you in this segment that they really don't care to understand why these things are happening. They're just noting them for the case of saying that they're studying the issue at hand.
She's a psychiatrist and the author of the book, The Power of Different, The Link Between Disorder and Genius. Welcome back, Dr.
Thank you for having me.
So
I don't believe that there's a link between disorder and genius. I think that people that are geniuses or who are extremely erudite or mentally acute by nature, they're always going to separate themselves from the masses of people because the masses of people are not going to understand them. Their job, their vocation on the earth is to provide some form of lucidity for the people because they have to become accustomed to the notion that most people are not going to understand where they're coming from. And that's okay. That's okay.
Let's talk about this. When you look at some of the results that Cigna published, did anything surprise you?
As a mental health professional, no. Probably to the general public, yes. Because really the numbers are quite high. Many of us, or at least sometimes, are feeling quite lonely. And many people actually are always feeling quite lonely, which is really important. It has physical health ramifications, mental health ramifications. And you could say that this rises to the level of true public health concern.
Now look at this graph right here. The only thing that the various criteria on this graph is telling me is that due to the deculturalization program in this society, people cannot relate to one another anymore. In societies with strong cultures, all of these issues are rectified. It says 46% feel alone. The reason why you feel alone is because you were never given a moral framework to understand how to conduct yourself so that you could have things in common with other people. When the understanding in a Luciferian society or a Thelemite society, when I say Thelemite, I mean Aleister Crowley, do what thou wilt, meaning do whatever you feel like doing. Of course, the average person next to you is not going to feel like doing what you're doing because they themselves are abiding by that understanding of Thelema, do what thou wilt. When you're raised in a society where you have a strong culture, you understand, okay, we're not going to do this because this is wrong. We're going to do this because this is right. We're going to celebrate these quote unquote high holy days because that's part of our customs. These are things that you don't see in this society because everybody just wants to do them. Just 47% feel left out. To me, that resonates not only in their everyday comings and goings, but also in their family as well. Why is that? Because people are having children and they don't know why they're having the children. They're just having kids to say that they're having kids. And then their child gets to a certain age and they're no longer able to relate to their child. They don't open up the lines of communication. Communication in this society is very, very poor. Very poor. Between men and women and adults and children, it's very poor. And it's exacerbated by the infatuation that people have with the internet and social media, where now they can create a cult of personality for themselves, a fake image where they can glorify themselves and make people think that they're someone that they're not. It says 43% lack companionship. Well, what do you expect when you're trying to foster the gender war? When you're telling women that men are their enemy? When you're telling little boys that they should worship women and that they should get in touch with their feminine side? When people get a certain age, once they hit puberty, they're supposed to be starting to investigate the quote-unquote opposite sex, which is really just the complementary sex. It's not the opposite sex, it's the complementary sex, because the woman is created to complement the man. That's what they were created for. But because in this society they teach the woman that the man is her competitor as opposed to her complement, everything in her mind is configured to believe that she should be trying to one-up the man. That's why even in these workplace environments, the atmosphere is always so negative. Especially if you're a so-called black man working in corporate America, the females for the most part are there to see how much they can provoke you. Especially if you're working around liberal black females. That's their number one objective, is to see how much they can provoke the so-called black men that are there, because they've been raised for their entire lives in matriarchal environments. They're accustomed to seeing the males in the household be marginalized, be denigrated, and they try to carry that over into the workplace. So of course you cannot get a companion with that mentality. It's never going to happen for you. If you're one of these mega feminists, you're never going to get that fulfilling relationship that you want, because you don't respect manhood. Same thing with a man. You have to respect the nature of the woman. You have to know how to love the woman, so that you're not there trying to demean and denigrate the feminine principle, but also you're not supposed to be trying to overly exalt the feminine principle either, man. And that's the issue that we have today with a lot of these guys who are trying to compensate for the lack of understanding that they have by overly exalting the woman. The black woman is God, all that nonsense and stupidity. Niggas like that need to be thrown off a damn cliff. Now, the fourth criteria states that 59% believe that their interests and ideas are not shared by those around them. Well, that's where you have to be comfortable enough in your own skin and have high enough self-esteem to understand that everybody's not going to like you. Everybody's not going to like what you like. That's part of life. You have to be able to move forward with your life as long as what your ideas and your interests are based around are not an affront to the laws of the Most High. You're not doing anything illegal or quote unquote immoral. It is what it is. And there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. A lonely person is feeling that lack of human interaction. They need that energy from another person to continue to move forward with their life. Someone who's alone understands that they have to learn how to deal with the issues in their life without being able to count on someone else for any type of emotional or spiritual resonance or compensation, for what you're giving that other person. You have to understand that sometimes you are going to be solitary for a short period of time. And I tell brothers this all the time. You cannot be scared to accomplish your goals. And one of the reasons that people are scared of accomplishing their goals is because essentially they understand that they may have to go through a period of time where they're without other people in their life, because that is how you get your goals accomplished, man. It's very rare that you're going to be in a transitional period in your life and you're going to have someone else who's going to walk with you through that path. You have to be ready to, whatever your goals are, starting a business, becoming great in something, you have to be willing to grind by yourself. So it's okay if people don't share your interests or your ideas. When they come to fruition, that's when people are going to come. So you have to keep things in their proper perspective. You have to know how to be alone without being lonely. But that comes from having a high amount of self-esteem. Your self-image has to be good. If your self-image and your self-esteem are poor, you're going to need other people just to keep going on in your life. And that's not a sign of strength.
Was there sort of a generational difference, like an age difference, and more so in one category?
That's what might surprise people the most. I'm not surprised, but in the 18 to 22-year-old category, that was actually, those people scored the highest in terms of loneliness. We tend to think...
Of course, I'm not surprised by that either, because that's the generation of being the most woke. All these people you see on the internet talking all this shit, pro-blackity black and pro-woman-ness and feminazi and all this nonsense, they're the most lonely. Because they don't even really believe half the bullshit that they're talking about. They're trying to see if they can get you to believe it. And that's the difference between being confident as opposed to being a blowhard. A lot of these people are just blowhards. They're talking shit all damn day. That's why I tell you, brothers, when you see somebody called an activist, all that is a loudmouth. Someone looking for attention. And 99 times out of 100, their home life, their personal life, their real life is in shambles.
We tend to think of loneliness as sort of an older person's problem.
And they've given a lot of these young people too big of a microphone. Your knowledge base should match your exposure base. You should not be speaking if you have no knowledge behind what you're saying. And this society has given that demographic of 18 to 22 years old way, way, way too much shine. Certain demographics in this society are given way too much shine. People who are extremely young, homosexuals, a lot of these confused liberal women, liberal blacks, a lot of these people have been given way too much shine. This is why they're so upset with Kanye West. But that's going to be handled in another video. A lot of the liberal blacks are very depressed. Why is that? Because they want that hug from the Caucasian man. They want that justification for their existence from the Caucasian. That's what it means to say, I want you to treat me equal. What you're saying is that you want to be treated like how the Caucasian treats his fellow Caucasian, how they treat their children, and that's never going to happen. You have to tell yourself who you are. You cannot allow someone else to tell you who you are. And that's the fallacy in equality, quote unquote equality.
Problem. But actually, the scores were highest for the youngest group, 18 to 22, and remained high and dropped very slowly until the oldest group. And you would be like, well,
Is there any indication as to why?
well,
Why would you not know why? Once again, this is why the woman is not supposed to be a leader, because they're not three-dimensional thinkers. Two-dimensional thinkers do things, they follow trends, and then when the after effect, when the aftermath is a depreciation of society, they're asking why. Well, clearly you made the wrong decision. Clearly the old ways were better. Like the scriptures tell you, follow the old paths. I tell you that in Jeremiah 6th chapter, I believe around the 16th verse. Just follow the old paths. There's nothing wrong with that. The man being the head of the household, very important. And when I say the man being the head of the household, I'm not talking about in a demeaning way. You're not supposed to demean your woman or your women or your children. With great power comes great responsibility. You're not supposed to take that power and abuse it. That's how you keep people from becoming depressed and becoming lonely. Because what happens when people become lonely? They start to make very, very desperate decisions. Right? And those things usually follow each other sequentially. People are lonely, they become depressed, they make bad decisions, and then they make more bad decisions, especially if they're not informed enough to understand why they're depressed in the first place. A lot of people in this society, they need a lot of help, but it's difficult for them to get the help that they need because the people who are establishing the standards of this society, they actually want people to become depressed. Because as I've stated, there is a lot of money involved in being depressed and being lonely. They don't want people to go back to having strong families. They certainly don't want to return to any type of male hegemony or patriarchy, at least certainly not in the races of color. That's for sure.
I think that there is, actually. The study didn't look at that specifically, but if you think about it, right, people are marrying later than ever.
Of course, people are marrying later than ever. People don't trust one another anymore. How can I marry you when I don't trust you? What is marriage in this society? Marriage in this society is a contractual agreement between two corporations. It's not what marriage was meant to be, which is the joining together of the man and the woman. A spiritual union. But in order for you to have a spiritual union, you have to have a culture. There is no culture here, so you can't have a spiritual union. Everything now is corporate. Everything is contractual. So, of course, men today no longer want to be married. Why should they? Basically, the vast majority of these females are liberal, and the liberal woman looks at the man as an oppressor. So for the most part, when people decide to get married, there's a countdown that's ticking. After you sign that contract and you have that lavish wedding ceremony that is supposed to placate the woman, allegedly, there becomes that portion of the relationship where you have to hope that she can deal with monotony. And you as well. That's all relationships are about, is the acceptance of monotony. Do you accept the notion, the fact that for the next 50 years or 60 years, the vast majority of your days are going to blend one into another? Things are going to be very repetitive. Can you deal with that? Are you mature enough to understand that that relationships are about accepting monotony? If you cannot deal with that, then you should not get married. To be quite honest with you, men in this society should not get married, period. You should not be signing contracts with these females. They're not mentally healthy.
Is actually, and partnership is a big antidote to loneliness. Human beings evolutionarily are social creatures. We need to bond. It was a method of survival. So when you don't have someone or people that you're bonded to,
right,
that creates real problems. So later marriage, less marriage, people moving.
Higher divorce. You left that out. All right, so now people do not relate to one another even after they're married. So that means that they got married in the first place for the wrong reasons. They did not investigate the other person appropriately. They do not know themselves well enough. How do you get to know yourself? You get to know yourself by understanding what you're about. How do you get to understand what you're about? By having a strong culture. by saying this is right, that's wrong. People don't have those standards anymore, so they're just getting married willy-nilly. Everything is being done to satisfy momentary urges. These are the problems. I just wanted to rewind it back again because I want her to explain marriage again and what it was originally set up for.
At it, right? People are marrying later than ever. Marriage is actually, and partnership is a big antidote to loneliness. Human beings evolutionarily are social creatures. We need to bond. It was a method of survival.
Now, did you hear what she stated? She stated that human beings need to bond because it was a method of survival. So what is she really saying? Marriage is no longer essential because of the level of security that has been provided for the woman in the modernized world. Brothers, once again, and this is why I make the series that I make in regards to should men fall in love. The reason why the woman wants you to quote unquote fall in love with her is because it makes it easier for her to manipulate you so that she can go about getting what she believes she wants from a relationship early on until she gets bored. Marriage as a convention was not set up based off of the premise of falling in love. It was set up based off of the premise of providing security for the woman while she was being transitioned from being owned by her father to being owned by her husband in righteousness, not from the standpoint of her being just flesh and blood cattle. But that's what marriage was set up for, as this woman herself acknowledged, even though she threw in her little 2 cents about evolution. But the fact of the matter is that in this society, there are other frameworks set up to support and provide for the woman, whether it be the government, the judicial system, etc., the job market. These things have made marriage an antiquated institution that no longer is relevant. You have to adapt to that. You have to stop marrying these females. Brothers, I'll probably be doing another video about this later on, but brothers have to learn that they have the power to breed out many of these ideologies that are hurting them. Liberal females, stop dealing with them. When you see that a female is a feminist, stop dealing with her. Let her be by herself. Let her suffer in silence. You have to establish the standards of the females that you allow in your life, of the people that you allow in your life, but you have to have your own standards first. You have to have your own standards for your own conduct. And watch how your problems go away when you stop allowing anyone into your life. But these people, they know why these problems are occurring. They just don't want to say it on television. Because there's a lot of money that gets made off of feminism and the homosexual agenda, the lesbian agenda, the transgender agenda, so on and so forth.
So when you don't have someone or people that you're bonded to,
right,
that creates real problems. So later marriage, less marriage, people moving farther apart from each other than ever before. Think about it. Older generations, families stay together. Now people spread out all
right
over. And a lot of feeling that you don't agree with other people.
Thank you. That's based off of ideological differences. Ideological differences are oftentimes based off of the concept of deculturalization. We have that here in this society a lot. It's a major problem. A lot of people say, why do you always talk about liberal this, liberal that? What about conservative? I state this intermittently on my channel. When I say liberal, I'm not talking about from a political perspective. I'm talking about from an ideological perspective. When you're liberal, that is just a code term for Marxist. Marxist is a code term for Luciferian. What liberals want to do is they want to obfuscate. They want to muddy up the waters. They want to confuse people by saying, why do we have to not do this? Why do we have to not do that? They want to let everything go. When you let everything go, that leads to loneliness. That leads to depression. Because now people don't have a standard for propriety. They don't understand what's right and what's wrong. So anything at any moment can happen in their life. And when you bring that level of haphazardness into your life, it's going to lead to a lot of problems that are unnecessary. There was a time when people were married and the woman couldn't just up and say, you know what, I'm bored. I'm going to leave you and go to another man. They couldn't do that. And that's why these other societies, especially in the Arab world, they don't allow that, because they know that if you let the woman do whatever the hell she wants, it's going to bring problems and confusion to everyone else. And they'd rather stone a bitch than let her run off with the cab driver that she thinks that she's in love with for that moment, because they know that's going to bring dishonor to their family. It's going to bring confusion to their culture.
We're very divided, and that creates a sense of lack of intimacy, lack of being included, which leads to loneliness.
You know, the later marriage thing, I know my mom is watching. She's going to be calling me after
Mine
the
as
show.
well.
Oh, dude, knock it off. Come on, man. Let's be for real. You sweeter than a damn lollipop.
Oh, are you kidding?
Get on it. You know, and the reason I say that is we gotta get on it, right? Because there are some real physical health issues that are linked to this phenomenon.
That is correct. And as I mentioned earlier, because evolutionarily we're meant to bond, when we don't have people that we're bonded to or feel close with, it creates a sense of danger for us because it was long ago dangerous. And that makes...
Now, do you see what this woman is acknowledging? She's acknowledging that relationships are based off of necessity. It's not based off of want. It's based off of need. Brothers have to understand that, man. When the woman talks about falling in love and all that, that's momentary. That's like someone who's high on a drug. When that high wears off, this is what people deal with in their real life relationships. Relationships are not about being in love. It's about necessity. And at the end of the day, both parties have to understand and embrace monotony. If you cannot deal with that, you cannot be in a relationship today. If you ever watch any of these post-apocalyptic films, they always show you the essential nature of the rapport between the man and the woman. And that is that the woman is going to need the man in a post-apocalyptic, chaotic world because she does not have the ability to understand or to establish any type of social mores. Like, you ever see the film that Denzel Washington did, The Book of Eli? Every female in the movie was a prostitute. Every last one. I'll probably be reviewing that film one day. But what were they showing you in that movie is that in a post-apocalyptic world where a lot of these conventions are broken down, where there's no longer laws to protect the woman, she has to seek out the protection of a man. Just reality. This society has created so many protective spheres for the woman that now she can create her own world, and the world that she has created for herself is leading to her own mental degradation. They don't know how to converse with men anymore. That's why they're 35, 40 years old, still running around talking about how they're looking for a good man. It's too late for your ass. Unless you find a sucker or a simp or somebody like that. Because there are just too many issues that you have to deal with when you're conversing with these females, where you have to find out what are their beliefs. In a deculturalized society, you always have to find out what somebody's beliefs are. And that's why there's loneliness.
Makes us release the cortisol, the hormone cortisol, which is the stress hormone, which causes cardiovascular problems, hardening of arteries, decrease in immunity, more likely to get infections. That decrease.
Hey, you ever notice how a lot of these females that you're around, they're always sick? You know why they're always sick? Because they're always stressed out. They're always stressed out because they have to maintain their careers and their jobs because they don't have anyone else in their life. They bought into the social paradigm that the woman should be competing with the man in the workplace. A lot of these jobs are too stressful for them. It's too much for them. And a lot of these bros, they're losing their hair at 35. They're having blood pressure issues. They're passing out at work. You know, it's so funny. I was getting some food just yesterday, and a cat just walked up, just started talking to me. That happens to me a lot. People just start talking to me, don't even know me. Dude was like, "Yo, man, I was in the post office, and I'm just there talking to my girl, and it's a long line, and a woman online asked me if I was online, and she knew I wasn't online. And I'm like, what's wrong with this bro? Does she need some dick? And I'm just there laughing, listening to this dude's story, because a lot of regular dudes are figuring out that so many of these lonely ass women are angry because they no longer know how to relate to a man. They no longer know how to maintain or even establish a relationship with a man, and that's why they're so antagonistic to regular men that they don't even know. Not understanding that you could run into a crazy dude, just knock your ass out because you have a funky attitude.
Decrease in immunity also leads to higher rates of cancer. So there are lots of actual physical health problems that can occur as a result of prolonged feelings of loneliness. In addition to that, depression is a big result of loneliness. And depression...
Thank you. I already stated that.
Is actually the #1 source of disability in this country. It's a very common illness, and loneliness can be a big precursor.
I would have thought that social media impacted this as well, but it didn't have as big of an impact as I would think.
So actually, it's a little misleading. It says it doesn't have an impact, but really what we're talking about is a bimodal group. So the group that uses social media to add to their in-person contacts and keep the relationship better, so to speak, that group, it did not impact, not surprisingly. But there are many people who don't have in-person contacts, who are only on social media sort of looking at what other people are doing, looking at how other people are not alone, or it seems like other people are not alone.
Exactly, because most of these social media platforms are only created to maintain a facade for a person so that they can tell themselves that they're not lonely. So it's just an enigma within a puzzle.
What you want.
And that group, it really does enhance those feelings of loneliness. We know that social media leads to more depression, more anxiety, and that may be another factor for the young group.
There was a New York Times report that came out a few weeks ago that suggested that boys are more at risk for factors that including increased alienation. Did this study look at that by gender?
Let me say this before she answers the question. And you'll oftentimes see this in many of these studies where they try to highlight the boy being more prone to depression or mental instability than girls. That is based off of the agenda to push and promote antagonism between the male and the female in this society. They love to do that to try to tell boys that they're weak and tell girls that once again, I don't want to hear that people are concerned about loneliness in this society when there's clearly an agenda to promote some form of antipathy between males and females. We know that for a fact because they encourage women to enter the workplace and compete with men for jobs. They encourage females to marry, quote unquote, as late as possible. And the fact of the matter is that the whole point of marriage, as I've already stated from the very start of this video, was for both roles to fulfill their role of complementing the other. Now the male and female are pretty much just roommates in a house together. They're always arguing about what the other person should be doing. And the reason for that is that the female is taught to usurp the authority of the man at every turn. And the man is being taught, the male is being taught that the female should be above him, and that is going against his essential nature. So he's not just combating against the woman, he's combating against what he's been taught for most of his life.
It did not, well, actually, no, I take that back. It did in a very broad way and found that both males and females really do suffer from this. Now, they may handle it different, and that may be something that the other study looked at. So men tend to get more angry when they're isolated, etc. And
no, it's actually the females who tend to get more angry when they're isolated, and it's very apparent when a female is lonely because they become very, very desperate. Not saying that men don't become desperate as well, but I think that most males who've been raised to understand and embrace their manhood, they know how to deal with any situation that comes about in their life, whether they be abased or abound, as Paul would say, meaning whether they're brought low or brought high. Life is going to bring you certain ups and downs. But the main thing is that you have to know how to communicate. You have to know how to relate to the people who are important to you in your life. You have to know why they're important to your life. So I think that males in general, when they're raised appropriately, they know how to deal with that issue more than the female does, because once again, even by this psychiatrist's own admission, the nature of interpersonal relationships was based off of the protection of the woman and really of civilization in general. That's why people banded together, was to protect themselves against wild animals. The woman was passed off in marriage to her husband to ensure her protection after she was no longer under her father's care. So the overall dynamic between the man and the woman is going to be different. So you cannot expect them to respond to the same issue in the same way.
And women more cry in the shower, as we were speaking about.
Crying in the shower? Bitch, please. Every day, these so-called liberal corporate broads are running home from work to make sure that they can catch Walgreens open so that they can get their new dose of antidepressant medication. Just knock it off. Crying in the shower.
So there may be differences in reaction, but it does affect both men and women. And I would say, we have to consider this as a public health issue. And what can we do? There are things we can do to encourage people to have more in-person contacts, like, your mother will do later.
And take advantage of this to have open a conversation.
No, that's not how the issue is going to get solved. But as usual, the nature of the woman, look, it's nothing against them. Women by nature are not problem solvers unless it is coming to issues regarding their children and in their family. Are there exceptions to that rule? Absolutely. But due to the fact that the woman essentially is not a rational or logic-based thinker, she approaches everything with her emotions. So they don't really understand how to solve large-scale problems. because that would normally entail that they have to discipline themselves. The woman does not want to discipline herself. She's like a child that's allowed to play in the backyard for too long. When it's time to come inside, they try to rebuff their parent. And that's the main conundrum that men are going to have to deal with in these last days. You're going to have to deal with understanding that you have to be able to discern and decipher how compatible you are with the female that you're with based off of her ability to respect the standards that you're setting for yourself and for your relationship with her. She has to respect that. She has to understand that you're going to establish the rules of engagement for the most part. And conversely, you have to be receptive to communicate with her appropriately, to receive her communications and to receive a lot of the messages that she's sending, because the woman is going to communicate with you in different ways. Sometimes it's through her emotions, sometimes it's through her verbiage, and you have to listen. You can't just think that you're going to issue these decrees and they're just going to follow. Once again, the woman is a lot like a child, man. If you're raising a child, you have to be very, very patient. And this is why these dynamics that are occurring today, they're bringing about so many problems, because it's making the female believe that she can communicate to the man, not even on an equal level, but that the man is beneath her. And this is leading to a lot of problems. A lot of brothers have to understand these dynamics so that they can avoid this bullshit.
Conversation.
That's right. And get people to join you.
There's not too much conversation.
That's
There's not too much conversation.
Dr. Gil Schultz, we're out of time for this conversation, but thank you.
My pleasure.
Coming up.
But anyway, that's it on volume 2 of Why Americans Are So Lonely. I'm sure that there will be many more installments on this issue. But brothers have to please understand this. If you're lonely, it's because you're not doing a good enough job of making sure that you're establishing your own standards for yourself and what you want out of life. Whatever it is that you're missing in your life, you can have it as long as you pursue it appropriately. And you stick to it and you maintain your goals. People who are lonely oftentimes have set very unrealistic goals for themselves, like many of these females. Oh, I thought I'd be married by 30. I thought I would have a house and 2 kids by 35, and they don't have that and they become lonely. You cannot live your life like that. You can't set any type of milestones for yourself based off of what you have been able to acquire. The only thing that you can do is set goals. Once you reach your goals, you'll find that a lot of these other things are going to come along with them. And the main thing is to make sure that you have, and this is for the brothers, you have to make sure that you have the appropriate rapport with the Most High, because that's going to stop you from being too concerned about how people value you. You can't worry about how much other people value you. You have to value yourself. But anyway, peace.